Welcome back to MVM. This is the moment you've been waiting for, or we've been waiting for anyway. This is our 2018 top 10 lists for both Jeremy, myself, and Ryan as well. So we're going to get right into it. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each title because you might have already played a lot of these, but we are going to give you a few reasons why we chose what we chose.
Or maybe why we chose it so low or high up on
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, and I want to start by saying that this was a tough year. This was a battle for me.
And
So,
we
what about
mentioned
you
that the
guys?
other day. I think last year was just as strong, at least for me.
It was a strong year this year. I do feel like I had a tougher time whittling it down. Like some of the ones that are not on my top 10 are certainly going to be on other people's top 10s. And
Sure.
and it was very difficult not having them on my top 10. So my honorable mentions, which we might discuss at the end,
Yeah, I have a couple.
there's going to be even more than we're going to discuss because there's a lot of titles that feel like they were just shy of making my top 10.
Do we want to start at number 1 or number 10?
Start at number 10.
All right.
Let's do anticlimactic.
All right.
Let's be very anticlimactic.
Start with you, Ryan.
Start and
I will
how
start
did you do your list?
Is that your
So-
passport, by the way?
It's not, this is a notebook.
Okay.
So throughout the year, I kind of make notations next to games that I think I love this game. This could be a contender for top 10. When I got to the end of the year, I had about 20 games with that notation. So it was a little harder for me. I had to kill some darlings, so to speak. There's
Kill some
games that
darlings.
I would have sworn when I played them, said this game is going on my end of the year list.
And it
then
didn't?
it just didn't end up there. Barely. I'll say the next 5, to 11 through 15, could have been in the top 10.
Sure,
Very
that's
close. So-
like what I said, yeah.
so my number 10 is Rising Sun, which came out this year. It's just so much replayability, so many different clans, so many different cards, so many different monsters. I think I could just continuously play that game and have new experiences
It's a lot
every
of game.
time I've played it.
It's a lot of
It's
game.
interesting because probably 6 months ago that would have been your number 1.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I mean. Earlier this first
yeah,
half of the
that's true.
year,
Yeah.
but a lot has come out. Yeah.
It's backloaded for sure with
Yeah,
titles.
it's always hard to get all those played.
I
I mean, there's
know.
going to be games that aren't on my list at least that I just haven't played enough
Yeah.
to be able to get
I'm
on
sorry.
here.
at all.
I thought Rising
Yeah.
Sun would be my top 5, but when I really sat and looked at what was out, so there's just some games that I would rather play than Rising Sun.
Well, that's a solid top 10 candidate
Yeah.
for sure.
All right.
My number 10 is Chronicles of Crime. This one is from Lucky Duck Games. We've had this in our hands in some form or another for quite a while, but it has delivered just in the last couple months,
Right.
probably.
Right.
For my money, this game, for that sort of team-based deduction style, like mystery-solving game, which there's been a lot of lately, I think this one is easily the most innovative. I think this is an example of a game getting the introduction of technology really well. We all know Detective did that as well. I like the fun, playful way that this game did it. And the fact, even if you didn't use sort of like a headset to use the goggles, just looking around in the rooms looking for clues, it's a lot of fun. Never seen it played with a group where the group wasn't really engaged in having fun with this game. So Chronicles of Crime, if you haven't checked it out, definitely take a look at that. That's my number 10.
All right. I lied to you guys. Smartphone Inc. is my number 10.
Ah,
And I'm so glad I played. I've played it once, and it's. I probably shouldn't put it on the list because I probably need to play it more times. However, it does a lot of really neat things in the game. Number one, you're trying to build a smartphone company or trying to ship your smartphones all across the world, but it takes turn player order and makes it a very integral part of the game because the turn order determines when you get to actually sell those phones, so you can block out locations from other players. Also, this is a game that plays just as fast with 3 players as it does with 5. But the part I like best about the game is you have these 2 boards and you're overlapping them to be able to take specific
It's literally like a
actions.
puzzle. Like
It's like a puzzle
really
piece, and as you
cool.
introduce more pieces to it, you're deciding, do I want to deliver? Do I want to go to manufacturing? Do I want to do technology? And there's all these different things on the board you're trying to balance, and you're trying to balance your prices as well because you want your prices to be perfect so you can sell those things at the right price, but you also want to sell them low enough so you can go before other players. And as the board
Yeah.
starts to stretch out, you start to be in the same countries as other players, so that becomes even more important in
That
the game.
puzzle mechanic may be one of the most interesting mechanics I've seen this year.
It's really good. It's a really good game.
mostly economic game, right?
Oh, 100% almost.
Yeah,
Like,
but it's don't take economic to be like a mathy game because
Sure.
it's not super mathy. There's math
It's
at the
mathy
end of
enough
the
that they
round,
print multiplication tables inside your sheet for you.
but that's
so-
just to give you
That's
points
fair.
and money. That's true, but it's
No, it's
not
a
super mathy in the way that you would think.
Yeah,
like
I haven't tried it.
Like an economic
It's not
game would
it's not
be.
as heavy as like brass, for example.
No,
I
not
keep
at all.
hearing that I should.
It's really good.
I'm looking
It's a
forward
great
to it.
game.
What's your number 9?
We're on number 9 now. Number 9 for me is Narcos, which we played several games of Narcos. Maybe my favorite example of like that hidden movement style game, but the way it handles hidden movement is very different because you're kind of actually locked into one space and all the agents are trying to find you, and you can only move at very specific times. Like, it just does a lot of really unique things with that mechanic that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite genres of all time, and this is competing with games like Letters from Whitechapel and Fury of Dracula. And I do think, it didn't make my list, but I do think Narcos is probably, outside of maybe Whitehall,
Yeah.
Narcos is probably the best hidden movement game there is, simply for the fact that it's very simple to play, and the fact that you're not moving that guy.
Yeah, it's-
You know,
Right.
you're that net that you're creating is so distinct to that game that it's really, really fun
That's
to play.
what I like about it, is that it's not. Some of those games you've mentioned, sometimes I can feel like the person who's moving the hidden movement around
Yeah.
has such an advantage, and you can feel lost as the person pursuing them. In this one, it really
other way
feels
around,
a little
really.
bit the other way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
That
It-
net tightens, and it's like you
More-
start to panic. a
More
little bit.
often than not, the person who's being pursued feels like, oh, this is unfair. They're sniffing out my trail really
Yeah.
quickly. But yeah, really good. I love that game too.
Yeah.
My number 9 is a small game, but one that you should definitely get to the table, and this is called Silk. Silk came our way. This is from Devere, and it is a game that looks like it should have been themed with sheeps and shepherds and sheepdogs, but they're silkworms and mastiffs with horns and really strange things. So the theme is really appealing. The artwork is fantastic. But this is mostly an abstract game with, for me, quite a bit of take that. Like,
Yeah, I'm
not a
surprised
big
to see this on your list.
I'm not a big take that guy, but this game is just fun, and it makes it so it's not as punishing, because maybe it's because it's so punishing throughout, and there's so much take that you're just like, whatever, we'll just roll with
Right.
it. The other thing I like about it, and we like this about all games, the degree to which you can manipulate what you want to do is limitless.
Yeah.
So you're rolling dice and using those 2 dice to do one of 6 actions, but you can use your victory points
Yeah,
to
mitigate,
mitigate those dice and change them to whatever you want, and the 6 rolls to the 1, so you can basically go anywhere and get anything you want done at the cost of your points, which feels very liberating. And the decisions there really open up. So play Silk, it's a lot of fun. It's probably a harder game to find, though.
It's a very good game.
Yeah.
I had a choice between 2 titles that I wanted to pick, and it was between Coimbra and Gugong, both medium weight Euro games. And I picked Coimbra for the fact that it's developed by those same Italian designers that we all love so much. I love the dice manipulation in this game, that dice can either be the value of the die or the color of the die. I do believe that this game, I've played it probably a half dozen times. It's probably going to lose steam after the first 10 to 12 games. So I think it really needs an expansion to carry on, but even the base game alone is really fun. And those mechanics of trying to use those dice at the right time and then putting them on that chart on the right time is really, really fun.
Yeah, a lot of satisfying combos.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful looking game,
Oh,
too.
it's gorgeous.
So that's your number 9?
That's my number 9, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Number eight,
sir.
Number 8 is, for me, Newton, which came out of Gen Con this year. Another one by, this one is Simeone Luciani, I think, did it kind of by himself. But Newton it's just a huge puzzle. Like, so many puzzling elements, and it takes bits and pieces of his other games that I've enjoyed. You can see a little Marco Polo. You can see a little of his other games in there. You're moving around a board. You're studying at schools. You're trying to fill your bookshelves. Like, there's a lot going on, but really it boils down to making the right moves at the right time to try to fill those bookcases up, and it's super interesting.
It's one I haven't played yet still.
Oh,
played
you
Newton at
need
all?
to
No,
play it.
I
I've
need
played
to
maybe
play it.
six games of it.
I'd be willing to guess that there's a good chance it could have come onto my my top 10, because we like their game so much. But yeah, I haven't played it.
Cool.
My number 8, like Jeremy's number 9, is Coimbra. Everything that Jeremy said, I would double down on. Like I said, it's a beautiful game. There's a lot going on, and I wouldn't say it is a very good medium weight game, and I have not found anyone in my various groups who can't play it and doesn't like to play it. Like, everyone seemed to enjoy this. Just the idea of drafting the dice for both the pip values and the colors, and those cascading decisions, the cascades of those decisions is really, really satisfying.
Speaking of making decisions based on colors, my number 8 is Underwater Cities. And it would be probably in my top 3 if it weren't for something I'm about to talk about in a moment. However, it is a Euro game in which you're using cards for multi-purpose, like anything else we enjoy. You're using them as a worker to take a worker placement spot around the outside of the edge, but also the color, you can double down if you use the right color in the right worker placement spot. I do think that it has a broken strategy. I know the designers chimed in into some messages I put about kelp farming, because I think kelp farming is really powerful in this game. I don't know if it can be fixed with an expansion, but I hope it does. However, the game itself is so satisfying to play. It does everything that Terraforming Mars does for me. It gives me that same feeling, but it does it in a better way.
Yeah, it pushes those same buttons.
Absolutely.
Totally different game, but you leave the table feeling very similar.
Yep.
7.
Yes.
7 for me is Gugong, which is, I don't even know how to describe it, because it's not really a worker placement game, but you're placing cards from your hand onto action spaces on the board to trigger those action spaces. You're basically exchanging goods with the board. It's by the same guy that did Hansa Teutonica, which is one of my favorite games. I don't know where I stand on this versus Hansa. They're both great. I think there's room for both of them. But this game, just like the packaging and the components and the artwork and illustration, everything on this board looks fantastic. And the gameplay lives up to that.
Yeah, the gameplay is really unique. That whole, I mean, kind of like a game like Raiders, where you're taking one worker and then taking another worker, but it adds a layer of the value of these gifts that you're exchanging to it, which is really interesting. And like you said, you make a good point, and this is going to affect some of my choices down the list as well. The presentation of games these days is just way up here. Like, the more we're seeing these game trays and whatnot, that has an impact on me.
Right.
So if a game is good and another game is really good from a gameplay standpoint, and one of them has that, it's going to notch above the others. So Gugong's really good.
Cool.
My number 7 is a game I've played not just once, but twice now.
Okay.
In fact, just before we recorded this again, and that's Vindication. This is a game that has just delivered. It was a Kickstarter, late last year or early this year maybe, under the name of Epic the Awakening, and they changed the name to Vindication. This game looks like more of an Ameritrash style game. It's like an open sandbox adventure game where you're going and exploring around this map, but this game is pretty much pure Euro mechanics in terms of collecting resources, using those resources to do things, and the resources are attributes. The game is gorgeous too. My point about Gugong just now, it counts double for this game. The presentation, the graphic design, everything is spectacular. And a silly thing to note, but one of my favorite things, it has a player aid that you could if you played this game once, all you need is that player aid to remind you exactly what you can do in this game. Fantastic rule book as well. So
and game trays, just like Gugong.
Yeah,
the
game trays are awesome.
Those game trays are so great.
It just makes setting up a game, and this has a lot of setup. It makes it fun.
My number 7 is your number 8 or 7 is Newton as well. Simone Luciani is one of my favorite designers. It has card drafting, hand management, deck building, and also has that unique mechanic where you're laying that card down and you have to give it up at the end of the round, and you're going to be building those over, is it 6 rounds that you play in the game?
6 rounds, yeah.
It's just a really, really fun game.
It has a little bit of everything.
It does. Just as you had mentioned, it's got a lot of different mechanics that come together for really, really good package.
I have to try it.
No, you do.
Yeah.
Right after this.
What's your number 6?
So my number 6 is Underwater Cities, and it's number 6 for the same reason you mentioned. I think this game could have been a lot higher, except, I mean, after 5 or so games, when you see one strategy winning every single one of those games, it just kind of like, it lowers the impact, because it's, you kind of feel routed into doing that. But besides that, the game itself is just very fun.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there will be expansion content that comes out that will probably address that and maybe even give you more things to do.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I think this is Delicious Games' first game under their new label, and it's coming out from Rio Grande, so we'll see what happens.
Well, we all have
with
faith,
it.
too. It's Vladimir Succi who did Pulsar, which we all love as well, so cool.
My number 6, to change things up a little bit, is a little game called Just One. This is a pure party game. Have you played it yet?
No.
Oh my gosh. Just one is a blast. At BGG Con
That's cool.
and at PAX U, a ton of this game was being played. You're writing words down to get someone to guess a word that they don't know that's on a card in front of them. But the rub is, if you have the same words, they get canceled out. So some of the clues around the table, it's a co-op. So you're all working together, get through this list of cards. It sounds like an idea that, like, how could this not exist until now? Surely someone had done this years ago. They didn't. Try it. Guarantee you'll have fun playing just one. This is from Repos Productions.
My number 6 is Blackout Hong Kong. This would, again, be higher up on the list. This is where gameplay is better than the packaging in this case. I mean,
sure.
This is an ugly game. It's not a very pleasant game to look at, but it's done by Alexander Pfister, who's another one of my favorite designers. It uses the same style of mechanics of Mombasa, where you're taking your cards and you're putting them down below on this tableau, and those cards can't be used until you pull them back in your hand. It's super, super satisfying game with a lot of different combos that you're putting together on your player board.
Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's one of the thinkier games that I've played this year.
Yeah.
When you sit there and you have to consider, like we said earlier about cascading decisions or results, there's a lot to think about as you play those cards.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, like you said, you're not getting them back until certain circumstances, so you got to be really careful as you play that game. But yeah, it's good.
Well, let's just keep going because my number 5 is Blackout Hong Kong.
All right.
Wow, you guys are in sync, man.
I know. It's just, we have similar taste in games anyway, but I do agree with you about the board. I see what they were going for with this like blackout idea, but
Sure.
but it just leaves the board looking dull. Like there's just
The
nothing.
cards look dull too. The art's
There's just nothing to the
fantastic.
board itself. There's nothing to make it really stand out.
Which is surprising when you have that game and you have Coimbra, which are both from Eggerspiel.
Right.
That one would look so great, and the other one doesn't look as good, and it's just from another really good acclaimed designer. So.
It is interesting. I mean, I'm too surprised that it looks the way it does. Although, like I said in our review, it's kind of grown on me. I don't mind it as much.
I mean, it doesn't bother me enough. I mean, it's still in my top 5, right? And
sure.
The gameplay is so solid that I would play that game even if it was on a scrap of paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's got some really interesting gameplay.
But next.
My number 5 is The Quacks of Quedlinburg. This is from North Star Games. This won the Kenner Spiel earlier this year, and this is another sort of light, I don't know if I'd call it gateway, but it's definitely a light, family-friendly game where it's push your luck, and you're building a bag full of ingredients and pulling them out, and it's just fun. We talked about this on our review.
Yeah.
There's one thing when you're pushing your luck with dice because you roll them and it is what it is, and you're like, But when you put your hand in that bag and you're like, oh, I wonder if this token I'm feeling is the one that I need or one that's going to bust me, and you pull it out, it's exciting around the table when that's happening. A lot of fun. So Quacks of Quedlinburg is my number 5.
My number 5 is Chronicles of Crime. It's got gorgeous art. It has that VR component, which is so different than anything you've played. Being in the game and looking around that crime scene is just enjoyable for everybody. Yeah. It's one of those games that, one person can look at the screen, but everybody wants to take a look at that point. So it's very communal and just a very fun detective style game. It's not so much like the detective that we played from Portal, where it's very serious. It's very it's got mature content by all means, but it's very lighthearted in the way that it presents that material to you.
Yeah, and it's more bite-sized.
Oh,
sure.
Easily.
It's just pure fun.
Yeah, I forgot about the art. The art is fantastic.
Oh, the art's great.
What's your number 4?
Number 4. Number 4 for me is Coimbra. And it's a little higher for me, I think, than you. For some reason, this just resonated with me. I can't stop playing it. I think it's just how simple it is to play. Like, setup is easy. Like, I love playing Marco Polo, but Marco Polo can be a chore to set up. And Coimbra, you just put it out there and you go.
Yeah. And
you get to make so many interesting decisions every single turn. It's going to be one of my favorite games for a while.
Yeah, Coimbra strikes a great balance. A lot of good medium weight Euros have a few different things that you do. And some of them sometimes go too far and there's too much that you're doing, like a Bora Bora, in my opinion. Coimbra is like right in that sweet spot where it's just enough things where it's not too overwhelming for almost anyone to play, and it's just a lot of fun, all of it. So my number 4, I think both of you have mentioned this already, Gugong.
Yep, I did.
It wasn't on my list, but I mentioned it with Coimbra.
Gugong, we said enough about it already, but this is my number 4. Great medium weight game, and in fact, I would say, in my opinion, it is the medium weight Euro of the year in terms of medium weight. It's like another perfect medium weight game that's pretty simple to play once you explain it. It's got a lot of things to do, probably more than Coimbra that you have to consider, but they're all fairly simple. I mean, some of them boil down to just moving up tracks and things like that. But really interesting mechanics, and again, gorgeous presentation.
My number 4 is Rising Sun, probably for some of the same reasons that you had mentioned. For overall value in games this year, for everything that you get and how variable that game is, not only with the contents of the game, but the seasons that you play with at any given time, the people that you play with. Yes, the game can be a little bit swingy as far as the range of points. Very similar to Blood Rage, though.
Sure.
I mean, the swing. But however, I love this game. I love the combat system. I like the area control system, the monsters that you use. I mean, it's just a very fun game, and the table presence in that game is phenomenal, especially if you have the premium deluxe version of the game as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of satisfying aspects to that game.
Oh,
the combat is
absolutely.
very interesting.
Yeah.
And if you have the deluxe version, just holding those tiles that you're selecting
Oh
from,
yeah.
Yeah.
They're like
it's just super satisfying, just
Yeah.
holding
sure.
them.
All right.
What is your number? We're down to number 3.
We're down to number 3. Number 3 for me is Teotihuacan, which just, I mean, of course it was going to be on my list, right? I've been looking forward to that game for a while, and it just does everything right, I feel like. When I play that game, win or lose, I don't get to the end and say, well, like, I just had a bad lot. You know what I mean? Like, everything is based on your decisions you make when you go to locations, when you stop to get cocoa, when you don't, when you collect masks, and when you ignore them. Like, there's a lot of ways to score points, and you can really mess yourself up. But if you choose a couple strategies and stick with them throughout the game, like, it's going to pay off for you, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played that enough. You guys have definitely played it more than I
I've
have.
played it a lot of times now.
I think I've only played that 2, maybe 3 times for sure. My number 3, another family-friendly game, Space Base. This one is from AEG, and this game is easily one of the games I've played more than any other game this year. I've wanted to teach it to everyone. I think almost everyone I've taught this to really enjoyed it. This is a pushing, well, not even a push your luck, but it's a straight-up dice game. A lot of people have called it like a good Machikoro. No offense, Machikoro, but it keeps everyone around the table super engaged, because when someone's rolling their dice, you're almost guaranteed that you're getting something happening on your board at the same time. And I have to say this because I just learned this late last night. They have expansions planned. I had no idea. There's this one called, I think, Small Nebula or something like that. I'm probably getting that name wrong. But part of the plan for their expansions is that it's like almost like a campaign, not legacy, but a campaign aspect where you get to certain points and you introduce new cards into it.
That's cool.
Almost like Fabled Fruit, maybe, in terms of how the new content and new mechanics get introduced to the game, and you can play it over time. I'm really excited to see what they do with that, for sure.
I like Space as well.
Yeah.
All right, my number 3, which will not be on either one of your guys' list, is Dice Throne Season 2. Talk about packaging and the upgrade
Sure.
from Season 1. We played Season 1 2 years ago. It was pretty much when we first started in VM. And Manny's art back then was already fantastic. But what Roxley has done to the game is they've added more art. They've included that on the player boards now on all the cards. Yeah, they've added 8 new characters, and it's just it's a push your luck Yahtzee game. That's really what it is. However, they've taken that and they've added all these different characters with different player powers and different cards that mitigate your dice, and it's a combat game like Magic. Each player starts with 50 health, and you're just whittling each other down. But the presentation of the game is just so good, and it's just pure beer and pretzels fun style of game. It's not meant to be anything else, and if you can live with that, you're going to enjoy it. If you don't like this style of games, you're probably not going to like it, but you still have to appreciate how beautiful looking this game is.
I'll tell you, it's not on my list at all, and it's not the kind of game I enjoy, and to be honest, there's parts of it that I don't even enjoy, but yeah, I want to keep playing it, partly because it's just so gorgeous looking, and there's so many cool characters, and they're so engaging, and they're very thematic. And so even me, who doesn't necessarily love the game, I would play it again right now.
Yeah, one of the cool things, you mentioned characters, and not just the presentation, but the whole concept of like Season 1, Season 2, and it's a whole bunch of new characters. It's reminiscent of fighting game, like video game fighting games where new characters come out, or Overwatch, or League of Legends where there's all these new characters. And you play this character and it's like, oh, that's cool. how thematically their powers work and how they're very different playing than other characters. That's one of the biggest appeals, and it is beautiful.
And this is me begging Roxley to redo Season 1.
Right?
I want to see that happen.
Get those new cards.
You're not the
yeah.
only one.
Yeah. All right, 2.
Number 2 for me is Gone Strong Clever, which probably the most played game for me this year. I am fairly
Because of the app.
Because of the app, but also not because of the app.
Really?
I mean, we just love to get this game out and just play it. Like, it's just, I have a couple people that I play with who are also all addicted to this game. And so at the end of game night, it's not uncommon to just pull out Gons and play a round of it. Like, I know the solo game has its issues. Once you get to a certain groove, you kind of just keep doing that groove over and over again. But when you're playing with other people, especially in a 4-player game, like, there's no way to predict or to see what's coming, and you just end up with these crazy, scores and trying to just like maximize with what you've got. It's just, I don't know. He hit gold with that game, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he had a fairly big year for coming out of
Yeah.
nowhere
He
and then
really
having
did.
I don't know how many
Right.
games hit this year, but yeah, that's a good one. I had that in my short list for sure, mainly because of the app. My number 2, you guys have both already mentioned, so I won't belabor it, but I really love this game, Underwater Cities. I don't think, I'm holding out hope that I don't think the kelp strategy is that overpowered, but it has served Jeremy well when we've played. But despite that, just like these guys, this game is super fun to play.
Yeah.
I said earlier that I thought Gugon was the best medium weight, and that's because I think this is a medium to heavy. This is a pretty, I wouldn't put this in a heavy
It's
category, but it definitely leans from medium to heavy because there's a lot that you're doing.
It's a lot more
on
of a
the table.
teach.
Would you pick Underwater or Pulsar if you were to play one or the other?
I don't know. It's a tough call. I really like Pulsar. Pulsar is not. I just said earlier this year, Jeremy's putting me on the spot because I do think Pulsar is probably going to climb its way up my all-time top 10 list. It might even
It's on mine.
hop in
already.
there. I really like Pulsar. I want to get more Underwater City plays. I want to play Underwater Cities at 2 players, which I have not yet done. So that's my number 2.
All right, my number 2 was very close to being my number 1, but my number 1 is just ridiculous. So Teotihuacan is my number 2. And I've loved this game since the moment we saw this one at the Gamma Trade Show back in March of this year.
Was that just this year?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was this year. Daniel Tassini, who did Zolkin, which is one of my favorites of all time. Again, that rondo mechanic where it's actually just a worker placement that you're moving around and placing your workers on those spaces and then dialing them up to higher pip levels to be able to do more things with them is very unique. Not to mention that the game is ridiculously variable with those boards that can replace all the main areas, so that the times that you get to approach those different spaces are going to be vastly different each time that you play the game. And it's gorgeous looking too. It's a really pretty game with really thick tiles for the temple that the pyramid you're building in the center.
I
I will
really
say
don't have a negative thing.
For a game that uses as much beige as that,
Oh,
it
yeah.
is pretty.
Yeah.
It is pretty for a pretty
Yeah.
beige-ish looking game.
All right, your number
All right,
one
number
was I
one,
gotta be
Here
my
it is,
number one as
everybody.
well.
It
Number
might be
one.
your number one. My number 1 is Betrayal Legacy. Because, I mean, I thought a long time about this, but just the gameplay experience that game gave me was unlike any game I've ever played before. Like, the narrative that was entwined, the epic moments that came about, the sense of discovery and exploration, and just pushing that narrative story forward was so satisfying in a way that I've just never experienced in a board game. Like, it's hard for me to explain it to somebody that hasn't played the game.
Sure.
Because
That's
from
me,
the
by
outside,
way.
it's like, well, it's just Betrayal. Well, it's like, sure, okay. But people aren't going to spoil for you all the reasons why it's not like Betrayal.
Well, no, it's the same thing with Pandemic, right? There's a lot of people who really don't like Pandemic.
Yeah.
But Pandemic Legacy, totally different story.
Yeah, I would play this campaign again in a heartbeat.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't played
Oh,
it,
you.
so I can't say. My number 2 is
What,
a
you mean
game
number
that-
1?
Or I'm sorry, my number 1. We're at number 1. I wanted to do 11 titles, but my number 1 this year
So did I.
is Cryptid. This game,
That made it to number 1.
it is my number 1
goodness.
title.
Wow.
Aside from Space Base, or in fact, evenly with Space Base, I've probably played Cryptid more than any other game this year. It's not a deep Euro. It's not a heavy game, but it is probably the best deduction game I've ever played.
Yeah.
This game, for all 3 of us, the first time we played it, I think we were all a little bit surprised and in awe of what we realized about it, because our first play we thought, okay, it's one of these spaces. And then when we all realized that you're whittling down all of your individual clues to one single space on this board, it was just fascinating. And there's so many different combinations. The board is variably set up. There's different things that are put on the board in different places. So the replayability of this thing is amazing, and every time I've played it, it's so satisfying. Even if you don't win, it is so satisfying getting closer to solving that puzzle. And when you realized, I think it's here, and you win, and then you're able to go around the table and say, this was your clue, this was your clue, this was your clue, you feel so smart.
Well, the great thing about Cryptid too, it's not really based on mechanics. Like, you are following specific turn orders and what you're trying to do, but it's all here.
Yeah.
Like, your ability to win that game is your ability to 100% deduce what other people are saying to you. So it's going to change 100% depending upon the person that you're playing with, or the people that you're playing with.
It's not a social deduction game, so you're not. I don't want to look at you and wonder if you're lying to me or if you're.
No, it's not social deduction.
None of that.
This is like deduction.
It's just pure logical deduction, which is really unique to see in a game.
And all the information is on the board. So there's no pads where you're like marking things off. Everyone has the same information. It's right there in front of you. And if you're the first person to figure it out, like I said, you just feel so smart. And I love that game a lot. That is my number one.
My number one is also Betrayal Legacy. This is by far the best experience I've ever had in a board game. Like, it is so immersive, number one. It takes Betrayal and it makes you want to play the next game the moment that you finish the previous one. Like, there are games, there's legacy games that I've played where you play it and you're like, I need a break. Like, this is a game that we immediately want to play the next one. It's the only legacy game I can think of that consistently, every single game that you play delivers new material to you. Like, every game you're introducing new tiles, you're introducing new things that can happen within the game, things I can't spoil, obviously. The haunts are really, really varied. We played maybe 45, maybe not even 45% of the content in the game that we play, probably less of the haunts.
There's 50 haunts, and you only played through like 13 of them during the actual game.
So you're left with the decision at the end of all 13 games that we played. Do I want to just play the mansion that we've built? And you can certainly do that. However, there's enough content to buy another game and to replay it and quite possibly play a completely different game. Completely different.
Would you say that round to round or session to session, did it leave you with a cliffhanger type experience? Like,
there's a narrative story that
like
underlines the entire thing.
What's going to happen, and that's why you wanted to play, or was it just because, oh my gosh, there's so much new content? I think that's a key with a legacy, because I've played some legacies where the first session doesn't introduce enough to want to make you, let's keep
There's
going.
a little bit of that narrative that's throughout all of it, for sure, but also the haunts that you witness can tie in and derive that story down multiple paths. So if we pick door A, we're going down this way, which is going to take the same story and the same narrative this way, or we could do something very different.
And one of the coolest moments for me is when you have on the back of your sheet, on your player board, you have spaces to record everything that happens to you, and you see the dates of when you're next. So you finish a game and it's like 1928, and you go to the next one, it's like 1978. Like, okay, well, this is like 50 years later.
Don't give anything away.
Like, well, this is no spoilers, but so you're doing the math. You're like, okay, well,
my guy could be 70 years old right now. Do I want to keep
the same guy? Do I want to play a 70-year-old man walking around here? I mean, it doesn't really impact the game too much, but it all just feeds into that narrative.
That immersion, for sure.
It's such a hook.
Yeah, basically. I would highly suggest, if you guys like legacy games, number one, even if you don't like Betrayal, and I have to be 100% honest, Betrayal is just an okay game for me. Like, I've played it half dozen times, and I was never enthused enough about it to want to own a copy of it. This made me love Betrayal. Like, if they make another one of these, I will be there the moment that they make this game and play all the way through it
Betrayal Legacy Season 2?
Yeah,
I imagine.
Better experience for me than Pandemic.
Yeah, me too.
Wow, so cool. So that's our top 10s, all the way down to our number ones. We do want to spend a little time talking about some of our honorable mentions, some of which I'll really quickly just rattle off, some of mine that were on your list. Rising Sun was just off. And again, I'm not going to list all of the ones that were close, but Rising Sun was one of them. And then two others I want to mention. Carpe Diem, which was one of Stefan Feld's games this year from Essen. just off of my list, mostly because it's not the most beautiful looking game, but really satisfying, a lot of variability. And then Victorian Masterminds, which is a gorgeous game, and I do want to play it more, but I think it just ended up just barely off the list. Is a little lighter than
But technically not out this year, so I think you can get away with that.
Also not out, so maybe I'll get some more plays and you'll see it next year on my list.
Yeah, I think there was a couple for me that I'm surprised that didn't make it, but a couple that were like, that I agonized over. Everdell, which fantastic game, could have been on here. The Estates easily could have been on here.
Good point.
Crown of Amara could have been on here. So these are games that I really agonized over which of these to put in there. But all three of those games are worth playing, all excellent.
I also had Everdell on here for the simple fact that the turn order structure is so unique in that game, the way you power through it. Rise of Queensdale was very unique for us. We really enjoyed the game. We played a lot of these games. However, the ending was one of the most unsatisfying endings that I've had for that legacy style of game, so I took it off the list. Narcos, which you had mentioned, is probably the best hidden movement style game I played. And then the last two, Welcome to is a fantastic roll and write. I just probably not going to play it as much as the ones I'd mentioned here. And then Villainous. I really still like Villainous. Like, I can't wait for the next batch of characters to come out to play. I know you're not as enthused about the game, but it's a good game.
I will say this, though. I'm probably as excited to see what characters they come out with. I'm just not as enthused with the gameplay experience.
It was a good year this year.
It was a good year. I think we're still in a great heyday of board gaming. That is our top 10 list for 2018. We may do a few small lists here and there between now and the next month or so, so take a look for those, but that is our top 10. Please let us know in the comments below what you think your top 10 list should be, or what some of the games should be, or if you think we're crazy about some of our lists, which we're not, but you can let us know in the comments below and we'll troll you back. So until next year, thanks for watching. Check us out on Twitter and Facebook and all that. Thanks a lot.